Hello, 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 you guys. Welcome to Castcast, where I am your host, Cassidy Streeter. And oh my lord, here is what I have to say. What the hell happened on Thursday night? I didn't bother to watch it because if you even watched, my Thursday night football analysis, I thought how pointless of a game. It obviously wasn't pointless to the Chargers ownership though, because fired the they fired gosh, I don't even know his name, who I feel like he should have been fired years ago, to be honest. He should have been fired years ago. Brandon Staley, that's right. And Tom Telesco. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that Tom Telesco did a fine job with who they've brought in, the personnel they have. I don't think that this is a untalented football team. Herbert obviously may have been kind of clouding some of the poorest offensive grabs of this team. But hey, what in the actual craziness was this that they had so many fumbles? I'm not even gonna pull it up, but they had like six fumbles. They lost five of them. You wouldn't think that the Chargers would have only 50 less yards than the Raiders had, and that the Raiders, well, they scored this insane amount of points, only had Devontae Adams reach above 100 yards, and he only had 101 yards. You guys, he had 101 yards. And boy, oh boy, the other crazy thing that I think about is that Max Crosby didn't force any of these fumbles. It's coming from all these other players. I looked at these guys and I'm like, who are these dudes? Who are they? Most of them. I'm like, this is nuts. This is asinine. It does not make any sense to me. It makes zero sense to me. It's like, I don't know who Kuntz is. I think I randomly saw him on a depth chart. DJ Turner, Spillane, Epps. Or correct me on this. They had 5 forced fumbles. And it's like, but who cares? Who cares? And then you have a game where it's like Max Crosby he has 1 tackle for loss. Yeah, he made like the headline that he's got the most tackle for losses this season, which, don't get me wrong, that is incredible. He's got like 18, I think, or something is what I saw. But man, it is nuts to me. It is nuts to me how bad the Chargers got beat this game. It is shocking for me to think about that the Raiders could have possibly actually outdid the Dolphins. Like, if you had told me that the Dolphins were going to score 70 on the Broncos, and then even though the Chargers defense clearly is worse than the Broncos, if you had told me that the Raiders, a 5-8 team, going into this game, a divisional game, we're just going to score a bunch of points. But obviously, these forced fumbles made it really, really short fields. And not having Herbert, God, the backup looked bad. And it's like I said, I'm like, unless their backup has some sort of, Browning outing where it's like, oh yeah, let's just go in and murder this team. Let's just make them look like, oh, this team should just clean house or something. But it was the exact opposite. Oh man, all of these guys on the Raiders defense maybe proven that they belong. I mean, if they can channel this and they can have, a couple turnovers a game or something, because like the Chargers have a good offense. They haven't had any, like, really any turnover problems. Like, they've had some like bum games since Herbert went out, of course. And I mean, obviously the Broncos game where Herbert went out, that it was a bum game, you know, it was pretty much a gimme for the Broncos. But like, you know, Herbert's been leading and scoring insane points since he entered the league in 2020. And now that he's out, I mean, this team is obviously getting a bit more exposed potentially, but like fumbles aren't the QB's problem. Unless the QB's the one that's fumbling them, which Herbert never had a fumbling issue. Like that much of a fumbling issue, if any. But yeah, this game, good Lord. I just look at this and I see Daniel Carlson, 9-9 extra points for 9 total points without having to kick an actual field goal. What a nuts and a freakish game. Like, oh, the Raiders aren't really playing for anything. I guess they're in the hunt, but they need to win out to even have like a slim chance. Like, it is nuts. Like, there are teams that aren't even in that if they win two, it pretty much knocks out the Raiders. But good Lord, what a beating of a game. You know, and then it's like Crosby shows up shirtless with a cigar to the booth. Is something else that I saw. Like, good Lord. But yeah, I'm not gonna roast on the Chargers really that much. They are obviously hurting. You lose, you know, your perennial quarterback. But I will say this: it looks like the contract for Herbert was well worth it. Like, the more this team gets exposed between now and the end of the year, since he got injured, the more they're like, oh, thank God we re-signed Herbert, because this team, I can't believe I would be saying this, but if they didn't re-sign him, they would be bottom of the barrel like the Panthers. You have, you know, some good talent on each side of the ball, but like without a QB, this team looks like one of the worst in the league. That ends my rant. Moving on, you guys. We have some games, of course, to look at. These games obviously being, you know, Saturday and Sunday, because of what the league, I guess, has done, you know, this week. I'm not sure why they're doing this. Trying to just, I mean, I can imagine that they're trying to create more hype, I guess, you know, and it's not like any of the games on Saturday are doozies. They are actually all pivotal games for the playoff race. I think a little bit more for the AFC, because the NFC, I wouldn't say it's obviously not a lock. But I mean, the most interesting thing in the NFC is the Eagles and Cowboys. Who's going to actually clinch that division? You know, that type of thing. So obviously this thing that they're calling the Saturday Showdown, it's going to be kind of fun. They're going to have 3 games, one at 1, another at 4, and then an evening game, kind of like a Saturday night, obviously, an 8:15 game, a night game or whatever. You know, between the best matchup, honestly, with Denver visiting Detroit, and, you know, the other games being Pittsburgh visiting Indy, and then Minnesota visiting Cincinnati. But and I mean, they're all shaping up to be, you know, games. Like, the only game I would say I would maybe be a little bit like, is this really a game they should show at, you know, 4:30 Eastern time on a Saturday or whatever, is Pittsburgh and Indy. But even then, that's still a pivotal game for seeding. Like, that's, you know, every game, like I said, is pivotal for this. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pull up these 3 games, and we're gonna kind of go over it for every one of you guys. We're gonna go to the main broadcast screen here, and we are going to look at these teams. Obviously, we have the Vikings going up against Cincinnati and Cincinnati. This demographic right here, completely irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. Browning has come in and he looks like he's like the best backup in the league. I'll just say it. He looks like the best backup in the league. I don't know of any other quarterback that has come in this year after all of the injuries and looked this good over 2 games. Obviously, last week he looked a little bit average compared to his Monday night debut, but Browning looks like he's just ready to go and lead Cincinnati out of the darkness. I don't know. Also, the other thing that I'll say is that Cincinnati has been known to get hot later in the year. So, maybe they're just a team that gains momentum later in the year, and Browning is riding that hype around the team, because this is a team that could definitely still make the playoffs. I think that, this is also a game where they can kind of prove that, maybe Browning isn't, so bad. Because the Vikings defense, well sorted from last year, where they're obviously ranked 10th. Danielle Hunter's playing really well. The passing defense isn't, just susceptible to big plays every time. Otherwise, I would say it was an automatic lock for them to lose against Cincinnati with guys like Jamar Chase, and then not to mention that Boyd and Higgins are both healthy. And I get that Boyd has been kind of having a down year, I think, type of thing. But like, these 3 fully healthy is arguably the best wide receiver core in football. You could argue the Dolphins, but to me, their third wide receiver isn't as good as Cincinnati. And obviously, the thing about Cincinnati too is I think they have the most balanced wide receiver core, where it's like they have a blazer who is also, he's got decent size, and Chase. Higgins isn't a blazer, but he's going to go up and he's going to catch it and contest it. And then you got Boyd, who's just always been really reliable. He's just kind of having a down year, to be honest with you. The only thing about this team to me that is kind of lacking is that they really don't have that tight end that is like, super lethal, but they haven't needed it. They have, they also have a really good running back in Joe Mixon. I think that, he's still one of the better backs in the league. And while they don't run it a ton, and he has had some games where he doesn't get going, he's still one of the better backs. I mean, you'd be a fool to say you wouldn't want Joe Mixon on your team unless you've got one of these just otherworld athlete running backs like Derrick Henry, McCaffrey, or Chubb, but obviously Chubb is injured. Looking at this game, here's the thing that I notice, and it's the injuries that Minnesota has, and they are big injuries. Alexander Mattison, their running back that they have been starting all year, is out for this game. You got Jalen Naylor out in an already somewhat shallow wide receiver core, in my opinion. And then you have Brian O'Neill, their star right tackle. So that leaves Christian Darrisaw, your stalwart young left tackle, to protect Dobbs. Nick Mullins. What am I saying? I'm sorry, Nick Mullins. I forgot that they changed who they were. I forgot that they changed who they were gonna play. At QB, they seemingly have already kind of given up on Joshua Dobbs, which kind of shocks me. But you have Madison out. You also have Jefferson with his chest injury, so he is questionable. And if he is not fully ready to go, I do think it's better that it is a chest rather than a hamstring. That means that his speed won't be, a factor. His explosiveness possibly, but I guess it could be hard for him to go up and catch balls if his chest is really affecting him. Maybe make his, arms moving a bit slower, as, when your arms are moving, you're utilizing your chest. And you're also using that when you run. But that's the big thing for me. And because O'Neill is out, you look at guys like Trey Hendrickson on the Cincinnati Bengals, who's been having a great year. And, all of that. And I guess on a secondary thing, Madison's out. So your running back is Ty Chandler, who I feel like I haven't seen him see the field that much this year. He is not your guy. Like, they obviously had Madison. They went out and they got God, I can't remember his name, the ex-Rams running back Cam Akers, who then got put on IR, and that sort of thing. I do think that this could be a gnarly game because Cincinnati's O-line isn't the best, even though, they've been doing pretty well protecting Browning. So I think I honestly do think that the Bengals kind of want it more, and they're on a hotter streak. And you look at the way that the Vikings played against the Raiders D last weekend, who it's like the Raiders D is nothing insanely flashy outside of, what they did last night, which is probably an outlier in all my opinion. And the one exception on their defense is Max Crosby, because like I said, he's been carrying that defense with how much pressure he does, how much he stuffs the run. He just does everything for that defense. He is incredibly tenacious and relentless when it comes to how ferocious he plays every single down of every single defensive snap he takes. But, the Vikings scored 3 to win last week. Who knows? I mean, they obviously probably thought, oh yeah, Jefferson is going to play. He gets hurt early. Maybe that threw off their game plan. Obviously, they probably had a good indication that Madison wasn't going to play this week. So who knows? Maybe their offense will be better prepared, but still with lack of talent, and a Bengals defense who, it says it's ranked 30th here, but they've obviously been, let me see here. I guess, they don't show the previous, but they've won 2 straight games. So they have some momentum. And I think that this makes this defense look bad. But in all honesty, this is a defense that was pretty good, years ago. And it's like you still have Logan Hall, you have Trey Hendrickson, like I mentioned. And I think that Logan Hall is one of the best linebacker pass defenders in the game and does a really great job. So it's like, you've got guys that can, give Hawkinson trouble, who will be the go-to guy especially if they're like, we don't want to have to feed it to Jefferson, risking another injury or just his injury getting worse and him missing time. Because the Vikings right now hold the slimmest of margins, a 1-game margin over many teams. And you're talking about that they're going to have to play the Packers here in a few weeks. They're going to have to play the Lions. So they don't have an easy end of the schedule. I know that the Packers, we didn't play very well on Monday night. I feel like it was a very, very odd game. We'll get to that later when I talk about them. But it's like the Vikings are, they got to be feeling some of the pressure. And I don't think that it's good that they're going up against a now hot team in Cincinnati. So with that, I am going to go ahead and say that Cincinnati takes this game. And Cincinnati is going to take this game, in my opinion, and I think that they are going to score 28 to 17, because I think that the Vikings are gonna fall to them, and their troubles are gonna keep on happening. And that is particularly because they have Nick Mullins and they don't have a quarterback, I guess, that they can trust right now. And like Nick Mullins, I'm sorry, but it's like this guy has been a perennial backup for years, and I don't think that's going to magically change because he's thrust into it late in the NFL season. But moving on, like I said, the next game that we got is Pittsburgh visiting Indianapolis, 2 7-6 teams. And, Kenny Pickett isn't playing again. Questionable is Isaac Ciamalo. And then for the Colts, they don't have Jonathan Taylor or Braden Smith and Seljan Alubi. So, teams with, multiple players out. But I think of the Colts, and I think this is a team that has been outperforming themselves all year. And then you look at Pittsburgh, and their defense has seemingly started to falter for whatever reason. For whatever reason. I just don't understand it. They just don't ring me as a team that has been playing gritty. And there's been a lot of stuff going on with them where, essentially is some former players, and most notably Ben Roethlisberger, have said that, this team has been ruined. Like their image is ruined, right? And to me, like Mitch Trubisky starting just isn't good. I honestly, in my opinion, I would start Mason Rudolph over Mitch Trubisky. He did absolutely nothing last week. Absolutely nothing. In a porous game that I feel like they should have been able to win. And the defense, I think, is suffering for it. Like, I think that this Trubisky just has nothing to offer at this point in his career. He doesn't really have the mobility anymore. He, even though he's been under this system and he should know the system, it still hasn't helped him. I think that the Steelers have weapons. You can't really tell me that they don't have weapons. You got George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, who's good. Allen Robinson, I feel like is a shadow of what he once was. But you also got Pat Freiermuth, who is really good. And it just doesn't look promising to me that, Minka comes back and they just didn't look good defensively. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But the Colts, they've been outperforming, I feel like, all year. I don't understand what you can say. What you can say about them, but it's like Pittsburgh losing to New England, and then there's still talks about them getting rid of Bill Belichick, and that they already decided that they're going to move on, which I think is a big mistake. I think that the Patriots have their unraveling started with Brady's departure, and they never prepared for after Brady. Because I guess they thought he was going to play till he was 50 in New England, which, I mean, there was some point when I would have told you that, that actually makes me think that they will, play, he will play till he will play till he's 50, but obviously not now, not now or anything like that. But looking ahead to this, I just don't see Pittsburgh holding up well against Indianapolis, who seemingly has, hidden stars. I wouldn't say Michael Pittman is a hidden star, but I think that Josh Downs, I think that Alec Pierce, and I think that Kylan Granson, have really proven themselves. And it's just, it's interesting to me. I think that even without Jonathan Taylor, him and his injury, I think that Zach Moss has done just fine for the Colts, and that they have a well-versed offense that is lacking star talent, but has consistency kind of across the board, which, I think is perfect for Minshew. He's not going to be that guy that's going to run out of the pocket, make a flashy play, because he is more of a pocket passer. But Minshew, I think, makes good decisions. And I think that, I guess I don't really think that the Colts have like that insane of a defense or anything like that. But obviously they lost against Cincinnati, who's been hot. But I think that Minshew still has been performing, pretty well. And it's not like, I mean, they're losing these that game to, they lost that game to, the Bengals, but they lost that game to the Bengals. But obviously beat the Titans pretty well. And we all saw that the Titans could compete with, the Dolphins this last Monday, as crazy as that sounds. And then it's like, the Colts have been putting up a good amount of points, besides against a Bengals team, which I said I think is pretty hot right now, So looking at this game, it's in Indy. Indy can't afford to lose against Pittsburgh. And I think that Pittsburgh is just kind of doomed. I think that, even though they got rid of Matt Canada, it's just too hard to implement another offense this late in the year. So it's another maybe reason why they're struggling, because they looked about the same, if not worse. The game after they fired Canada, they looked worse. They scored like 10, if I remember. And then, you look at the game afterwards, it's like they, 21-18 against New England, who, people were arguing that they might be the worst team in the league. The only team that rivals them, is the Panthers, but it's like, they're both bottom of the barrel teams. Like, even the Cardinals don't look like the worst team, and that's who everyone was like, oh, this is going to be the worst team this year. But no, it's the Panthers and the Patriots. Crazy to think about, but looking at this game, I'm definitely going with the Colts as my winning team. And I think that they score, honestly, I think that they score 27 points. And Pittsburgh, I'm going to say 13. And even optimistically, I would say like 17 or something like that is what I think they would do. But otherwise, that's my prediction for this game. Tell me what you guys think, if anything, about this. And we can move on to the night game, which I think is the most important. Moving to the night game, Denver Broncos visiting the Detroit Lions. The only injuries here for this game is we have Greg Dulcich, who has been out. Nick Bonito is also out, an outside linebacker. And then PJ Locke, the safety, which I don't think is huge. The Broncos are pretty healthy right now. And then for Lions, you have QB Hendon Hooker is out. I'm not sure what happened to him. He obviously got an knee injury, but he isn't their starting QB. Questionable is Josh Reynolds, the wide receiver, one of their go-to. Frank Ragnow has a knee, back, toe injuries. And then Benito Jones and offensive tackle Taylor Decker for the Lions. So I've been saying this. I think that one of the problems that the Lions have been having is that Ragnow hasn't been in. He is a top 5 center, in my opinion, in this league. And while, you look at this and you're like, oh man, there is no way in hell that the Lions lose to the Broncos. It's nuts to me that they're even ranked the 15th defense, to be honest with you. Who knows if it's because of points? I don't know how they calculate these, to be honest with you. It's like one of those oddball things that I've seen somewhere. It's like, really, this defense is like that. But, the Broncos obviously have been performing well lately. And the Lions have been on a skiddy slope. Like, they were games and games ahead. And, I mean, there's still multiple games ahead, don't get me wrong, of like the Vikings and Packers. But, hey, the fact that they haven't clinched the division at this point is just a sign of how rough it's been, because I believe that they were 9-2 at one point. I'm pretty sure that the Lions have lost a couple games. They've lost a couple games in a row. So looking at their schedule, their last game being against the Bears, who I was like, I feel like, the Bears could put up a feisty fight because they've been feisty this year, but Detroit didn't really score. And they gave up 28 against an offense that it's like, the Bears have had a really off and on season. Obviously, they've had some, quarterback injury problems with Justin Fields, but like for the Bears to hold the number 3 offense, as is claimed right here, to 13 points, 1 touchdown, is kind of, mind boggling. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm not ragging on the Bears because I'm a Packers fan, but like, they don't really have a team that's ready to win now. But they came out and they played out of their minds, on Sunday. And the Lions, it's been, very cautionary. Everybody's been kind of, they're worried about the Lions because they were talking about, how the Lions have arrived early in the season. Like, this is a team that is taking names, beating teams, and now they've struggled since Thanksgiving over the last few weeks. And it's just, man, it's, if I was a Lions fan, I'd be kind of paranoid. I think that Goff is still playing pretty well, but but gosh, there just seems to be something wrong with them. And their defense can't stop anybody. And I think the Broncos definitely they have a more veteran quarterback. I don't like Russell Wilson, but I think that he will be getting it to Sutton, who's been balling out this year. And, who knows? Maybe if Russell Wilson also sees that Jerry Jeudy is getting open, he will actually, hit him with a ball. And the Lions, I don't know what to say and what I would tell Campbell if I were to tell him, here's what you need to do to get these guys to play. Because honestly, right now, it's just like, it's like a deer staring in the headlights for their defense. That is why I am going to go with the Denver Broncos. Don't make me regret this. Broncos is like the one time that I'll actually pick you because I don't really believe in you that much. But the Lions are just playing sketch as heck. And I'm going to say that I think the Broncos win 24-21. And that is my pick for the Saturday night game. Now we get to move on and we get to go to the rest of the games here. So with that, we are going to do this a little bit differently. I'm actually going to go to the playoff picture here, and this is how I'm going to select. This is how I'm going to select the, oh my goodness. The rest of the games is I'm going to be kind of scrolling down on here. This is different than what I had before, I feel like. Let me see this. Okay, so we're going to use this one. This is what I was looking at earlier, not the Pro Bowl type of thing. But we're going to start off with these teams that are in the playoffs just to kind of give a rundown over the rest of these games. So, with the Niners, playing the Cardinals, there is no injuries. No, I'm not joking about that. There is no injuries in this game. Because of that, I am going to be picking the Niners. Yes, what a shock, you guys. What a shock. What a shock, right? But I think that the Cardinals are kind of scrappy. I think that Kyler Murray will have a hard time escaping from the likes of Bosa and Young. But I expect the Niners to kind of just really plow the Cardinals. And I say that the Cardinals are going to be feisty because I think that, this is their shot to kind of go out and try and play against a team that's obviously in their division. And the Niners, while they've been scoring quite a bit, I don't think I've seen that game where they just absolutely light it up. They play a lot more of a methodical kind of offense where it's like, yeah, they're going to take their time. They're going to be dipping and dunking, getting all of their guys incorporated so you don't know where you're going to attack next. And the thing is that when I saw the Niners play, in the last few weeks, they've been playing kind of some slouchy defenses. But I think the Cardinals' defense is feisty. Don't ask me why, but I think that, with how they said that they were going to be the worst team, I'd expect them to be getting blown out every game, and that just hasn't been the case this year. I know that's not saying a ton, but, they also seem to have new life with Murray. So with this game, I'm going to go with the 49ers. Obviously, they've already clinched, but they want to make sure that they keep this from. They want to make sure that they keep this from teams like the Cowboys, because the Cowboys have looked insane at home. Not to say that I think that they could actually beat the Niners. To be honest, I think that the Niners are like the big brother of the Cowboys, where they essentially have the same amount of talent. I think that Purdy's just a better quarterback, to be honest with you, at this time than Dak is. How many years he's been in the league. I don't think he's doing anything crazy impressive, even though people are like screaming MVP about him, But I'm going to go with them, and I'm going to say 31. Excuse my really bad drawing. I'm not right-handed. Against the Cardinals, who I'm going to say 17. And that's my prediction for 49ers visiting the Cardinals. Moving on, we've got the Ravens. And we've got the Ravens, playing the Jaguars. This is actually a big game. A big game. I think that the Jaguars, for them, this is, and it's obviously cliche to say this at the end of the year, but it is their biggest game of the year. I guess, what I'm honestly kind of thinking? They show no, give me a second for this. I'm actually going to go and look at something real quick. So Ravens Jaguars. Let me see. They don't actually. I'm thinking they're actually not reporting on like the injuries, on here yet, where they have the injury report. So let me see this. Maybe they okay. So I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the injury report here, and they say nobody. They say nobody is gonna be hurt. Okay, we're gonna stop going by them. We're gonna actually just look at the actual depth chart for these teams. So with Jacksonville, they list Trevor Lawrence as a full go. He doesn't have an injury. And the only other injuries that I see that they have is Christian Kirk, obviously, unfortunately, got a really bad injury. And, he's not going to play. He's on IR. And, you got several other players. Let me see here. You got Tyson Campbell, who is out, and Andre Cisco, their young free safety, is out. And, some other, other kind of minor injuries. But, looking at the Ravens, yeah, they don't have the only injuries on their offense are Dobbins, IR, Duvernay, IR, Mark Andrews, IR, and Andrew Voorhees, their right guard, is out. So, a fully healthy Baltimore Ravens offense with Jackson, Flowers, Bateman, and Beckham. At least, their wide receiver core, I guess. You can't really say this. And Mark Andrews being out is a huge blow, really good tight end, but I think that they still have plenty of weapons where it's like they don't really have to worry about that sort of thing. And then on the defense, like they have Kyle Hamilton is questionable, which is kind of unfortunate, but I think that they have Marcus Williams back there who's a solid free safety. And, they don't have many holes on this team. And Roquan Smith, playing out of his mind this year and that sort of thing. So, you have a Baltimore Ravens team that's pretty healthy going up against a Jacksonville team who lost their star wide receiver. I'll say it. I think that Ridley, he was saying stuff before the season like, "Oh, I'll get at least 1,400 with Lawrence, with T-Law," but he hasn't really lived up to the expectation, to be honest with you. And because of that, I'm looking at this game and I have to go Baltimore. Even though, wait a minute. Even though, goodness, the only thing that I hate about this is I can't see. I want to be able to see, I guess, who's at where. I don't think it really matters. So I'm actually gonna say for this game, I'm gonna say for this game Ravens. I'm just not gonna. Yeah, I'm definitely not gonna say the Jaguars. This is their game that they have to prove to me that they can win, and I'm gonna say Ravens because of how shoddy the Jaguars have kind of been on defense, and I just don't think that they're gonna be able to stop a fully healthy Ravens offense. I'm gonna say 31-21, a 20 point or 10 point differential, you guys, where, this team, could easily, I think the Ravens could easily beat the Jaguars and really expose them. Because to be honest, the Jaguars, well, they've played somewhat good against, good teams. They've also looked questionable against bad teams, and their inconsistencies are why their record is 8-5, this year. I just think that they still have, cleaning up to do to be more consistent, and actually show that they can do it week in, week out. Sorry, I'm stuttering a hell lot. But moving on, we have Cowboys, and I do know that they're visiting the Bills. Obviously the Bills are still looking. They're looking out. They're not in the playoffs, as you can see here, because obviously all these teams down here are on the bubble. They really need to be able to win. This game. They're 7-6. They're playing at home. I don't know what the weather forecast is supposed to be for Sunday, but it's obviously, going to be, we're midway through December, and the Bills, they got snowed out of their own stadium last year, and it's like, it's a place that can dump snow and whatever, and the cold and that sort of thing. And the other thing is that I'll say is that the Cowboys have not been playing well away. It's been like, I guess, the one kryptonite to this team this year. They would potentially be the 1 seed if they actually went and they played the Cardinals and beat them, in like, what was it, week 3 or something? That was a crazy dumb loss. Probably not week 3, but early in the season, it was ages ago, it seems like. But you have, you have the Cowboys, and all they really do is pass. I think the Bills have a very, very stout. I think they have a very stout, pass defense, regardless of what you think, and I think that, I think that they also have a really stout like run D, which, the Cowboys don't do a lot of anyways. And I think that they have the guys that are going to be able to cover guys like CeeDee Lamb, Gallup, and I mean, and their star rookie tight end, I forget his name. I'm still going to go with the Cowboys. I really think that this team wants to prove, and they have a lot of hype. I can't argue the momentum that they have, the way they've played, and what is happening in Dallas, even though I wish it wasn't the case. And I think that Dak, is due to have like one of these bad games. And I think the Bills are, even though they're 7-6, I still think they have one of the better head coaches. I think they have a really good defensive scheme. I think that they've just, and I think that Josh Allen is ready to go and prove that he can, he still has it and he can go and play against the Cowboys. But the other thing about it that I think about is that the Bills don't run it as much as I'd like it to. And I think that is the Cowboys' one major weakness is that they do not do well against the run game. Like, they just, they're way too much of a pass rush team, which there's nothing wrong with that. But if you can't pass rush because they're running it down your throats the whole game, then, Deron Bland is essentially taken out. Last week, Stephon Gilmore, played really well, against, Brown and got in his head and made plays. But it's like, those two of your best players on defense besides Micah Parsons and Lawrence, what's going to happen when you can no longer pass rush to force the bad play and whatever else? And I don't think that Stefon Diggs is going to be one of the guys that you're going to be able to have these guys stick to all game. He is just too slippery, too quick. But yeah, the Cowboys I think will win it just because I don't trust the Bills to run it enough. Is my main qualm with them is that they don't run it enough. I think they have the talent to, but they just don't. But I think it's going to be a gritty game. And I'm going to say Cowboys 28-24. And that is my prediction for Cowboys visiting the Bills. I think that the Cowboys get over their away slump a little bit. It's not going to be like a phenomenal win. If they do crush the Bills, I'm not going to lie, I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow transition there. Because, they're thinking about it. They're thinking about how, this could be the game where we just play on the road that we don't need to be in our home stadium. But, you never know. So that's what I'm calling for Cowboys at the Bills. And moving on, we have Chiefs Patriots. What a game for the Chiefs to rebound on. The Patriots, as we know, beat the Steelers, which isn't saying much. Obviously, they played Bailey Zapp. They didn't play Mac Jones, which who knows? Maybe that's the change they needed. Zapp has, some tenacity and really competitive spirit amongst him, but they went up against a Steelers team that is, somewhat broken and they need to be fixed, or they need like a reset or something, which I just don't think that they're going to get until like the off season. But I'm going to say the Chiefs. I'm not going to bother looking at who's available or anything like that. I guess let me look here quick. We might as well, I guess. I might as well see if there's anybody. Pacheco is out, which I knew about. I don't think that matters. Obviously, last week they were able to compete against the Bills. They didn't need Pacheco. They relied on Edwards-Helaire and McKinnon. And then you got Rice, Watson, MVS, Sky Moore, Toney. Obviously, Kadarius Toney, who the heck knows what is going on with him. Patrick Mahomes was really, 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 peeved obviously at the end of the last game. But I think it's, in Chiefs, you could say that they're as shaky as like the Lions are right now, in terms of playoff teams that are struggling late in the year. I think this is the perfect opportunity for them to just secure a win, put their minds at rest, and hopefully, win this game soundly, not have to worry about it, stay out of the news, get an under the radar win, and show that you're still the team. But Chiefs, I think that they're not. I don't think that they're going to score a crap ton. Who knows? Now that all this, Bill Belichick is on his way out of New England, maybe he just doesn't care as much. But I think that the Chiefs, are going to come out and they're going to try and score a lot this game. I'm going to predict 31 to 13. I think it's going to be one of those games where even with Bailey Zapp's competitive nature, I think that he is just going to get overwhelmed by a Chiefs defense that is playing, very well this year. I don't think that's been the reason for their qualms. I did just realize that I didn't cover the Dolphins. Now, the interesting thing, I guess, about the Dolphins and the Jets is that the Dolphins just came off of a bad loss to the Titans. The Jets somehow won. They looked like, they should be playing really well this year. Their offensive line isn't a problem. They, they can score at will in the rain. It was raining, guys. And it's absolutely mind-blowing to me that this happened with the Jets. And it's like, even Rodgers seemed surprised, was really happy for him. And it's like, what in the world? I just don't know what to say about this team. Obviously, goodness, I just don't know what to say about the Jets. It's so bizarre to me. It's like, why in the world does this happen? Why in the world? I just don't get it. I don't get, like, if they could play like this against a Texan team that it's like they're competing for a playoff spot. Not to say the Jets couldn't get in, but it's a freaking long mile of a shot for them to get in. But it's like the Dolphins, it's actually kind of crazy. But last Monday was a testament as to why Tyreek Hill should be an MVP. And I don't personally like him. I think he's too cocky. He's proclaimed that he's the best wide receiver in the league for years, even though it's like to me, it's a lot easier to be good when you are so fast and you just, escape deep against blown coverage against the deep ball. But he hasn't really had the amount of touchdowns I expect from a true number one or best in the league number one, But he obviously shows how much they missed him, even though they have a guy with Jalen Waddle with like this, similar top end speed, but not the same kind of bursty speed that Hill has. And he is questionable in this game. Me looking at their depth chart right now, and then you have Raheem Mostert fully healthy, who's obviously a Blazer, and there's quite a good amount of injuries to your line, like Austin Jackson, Liam Eichenberg, and then Teron Armstead questionable, Robert Hunt out, and just a very banged up offensive line. Robert Jones, not even their starting left guard, being the only one fully healthy for their starting lineup. And I guess it's kind of bizarre, but they obviously have, Xavier Howard is questionable. Deshaun Elliott, their starting strong safety, is out. Javon Holland is questionable. And it's like Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard, and then Deshaun Elliott were supposed to be like, and Javon Holland were supposed to be this really good, defensive back core. And it's just like, prone to injury, obviously, and I still think that they're somewhat susceptible on the defensive end. I just don't think that they play up to the hype, to be honest with you. It's like, oh yeah, we got the best cornerback tandem in football, which, they probably do, but they just haven't looked like a lights out defense. And that's what would make the Dolphins scary, is if they were lights out. Like, I don't think anybody would bet against them if their defense was that good, but they still give up a good number of points. I'm still going to say the Dolphins are going to win this game. And, depending on Tyreek, they may not even try to use him too much, because if they lose him, I feel like, their season might be over once the playoffs start, depending on how long he's out for, or how banged up he is, even when he comes back, when they'll need him to be back. Because against the Titans a team that, like, there's no way that hardly anybody bet for the Titans on Monday night. Like, I'm sorry, but they didn't. And they're like, and people could say, oh, it's one game, they had a one-off game, but that's all it takes in postseason. So going with the Dolphins, I'm going to say that they score 27, because I think that the Jets defense, they're going to have some momentum off of their win. They obviously just went up against a pretty good quarterback in CJ Stroud. I say pretty good because I just don't want to say elite yet. But I think the Jets may refer to their old ways of not scoring very much. I still think that they put up like 17, but it could be less. And that's my prediction for Miami against the Jets. Moving on, we already covered the Lions, obviously. And moving on, we have, a couple games here. We have, we'll cover this one. Buccaneers visiting my Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. Both teams 6-7. Obviously, the Buccaneers are winning their division over their win over the Falcons last week, and everyone saw the oddball, freaky deaky game that my Packers had against the Giants and DeVito. I don't think I've seen more of a bizarre game. Like, I'm just going to say it. I don't think I've seen any more of a bizarre game than that game. In that sort of thing. And here's the nuts thing. This week, the Packers, we have Aaron Jones says he's doing better, still questionable. A.J. Dillon, questionable. Christian Watson, I doubt he goes. He's doubtful. And his hamstring is apparently his hamstring is a little, is definitely tweaked a bit, which is never a good injury to have as a wide receiver. I mean, honestly, anybody. Hamstrings are very temperamental. And then Dontavian Wicks is questionable. Now, my Packers, obviously, you still have Jaden Reed, who's been playing well. Romeo Doubs, good hands catcher. Malik Heath, who has finally started playing after being injured most of, like, half of the season, I'd like to think. And then Samori Toure even came in and, I think he had a caught ball last week. Tucker Kraft has been playing really, really well in the run game, in the catching game. He's been doing a lot because obviously Luke Musgrave with his torn labrum, I think it is. But this is kind of a must-win for my Packers. We still hold a playoff spot, the 7th seed in the NFC. But there are a number of teams that are 6-7 on our tail. And the only reason I guess we hold it is because of a conference record that is better than them. But goodness gracious, after Monday, it's pretty crazy. And I guess, the three injuries on defense that I'm kind of worried about are Quay Walker still questionable, Jair Alexander still questionable, and then Darnell Savage is questionable. I do think Darnell Savage's injury is a little less significant due to the fact that Jonathan Owens and Anthony Johnson Jr. have come in and they are playing pretty well. But the thing about the Buccaneers to me is that they have better weapons than the Giants had. Baker, to me, it's like it's kind of prove it time for him to be able to prove that he, should be the starter next year, but they just haven't played super well. My Packers, last week, I don't know what Barry was doing. I know that he has to feel the heat under him because he played it abysmally at the end, and people could say that like, oh, it was such a mess of a game. Like, you can't really blame Barry. But you still just don't call the end of the game where you're playing prevent defense when they only need 3 points. And they have a minute and a half, which we've learned is more than enough for most QBs in the game today. That it's like, you only, a minute and a half, go 50 yards, from the 25. It's not hard. I'm sorry. And DeVito, to me, he looks confident. He looks like he has swagger, and he's, he did good things on his legs. And it's just like, and the Packers couldn't get to him. That was another thing, is that our Packers got 0 sacks on the O-line that lets up 5 sacks a game. And it's like, and you can't tell me you haven't seen Gary in some of his games where he just absolutely wrecks quarterbacks. Like, even against Goff, like when he forced 2 fumbles and whatever and had 3 sacks, it's like, and that's a way better O-line than the Giants had. But the Buccaneers have a pretty good O-line. Tristan Wirfs. I'm sorry about their center who's been really hurt, but they have a pretty good O-line. That's kind of left over from when Brady was on the team, but it's a pretty good O-line, So if my Packers cannot, the one thing that I'll say is the Buccaneers don't run the ball well, and my Packers are like, bottom of the league and, giving up yards on the run. I think that we're good when we actually need to hold them type of thing, not like the goal line type of thing, but I just don't think that's a formula for success, that you're always banking on being able to hold when you're at the goal line, type of thing. But this is one of those crazy games where it's like, you want to, if you lose it as the Packers, I've heard that like the percentage to make the playoffs, if you go 2-2 for the Packers, is like pretty abysmal, and obviously if they go 2-2, that's an 8-9 season. And, you play the Buccaneers, Vikings, Panthers, and Bears. And I wouldn't be surprised if, depending on how the Bears are playing, if that game means something at the end of the year. Where, it sounds freakish to say, but they just got a huge win over the Lions, so they've got good momentum. And the Packers, we really got to clean it up this week. Otherwise, you're, up with your back against the wall, where you have a very good chance of going below 500, which is not what you want, even in a weak NFC. Here is my prediction. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I just had one of those lapse in judgments. I want to look at this quick, the injury report, but Chris Godwin, questionable. Mike Evans, fully healthy. I look at this line and it's like, yeah, Wirfs, Mock, and Gideke, a pretty good O-line. I guess Vita Vea is doubtful, which would be huge. But the thing about the Packers is that you're either going to be playing with a banged up Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. And it's like, you still got, and I guess Devin White's questionable, Jamel Dean's questionable, Ryan Neal, but Antoine Winfield has been playing really, really well this game. This year. Where it's like he's been, he just looks like he's a cornerstone player at this point in his career. And then I guess Carlton Davis is out, which is huge. I think that will make things easier on the wide receiver corps of the Packers, which is clearly banged up. Here is what I think. I think my Packers win. And depending on what kind of offensive outing the Buccaneers have, it could be a close game. You know, each team has had their inconsistencies. The reason they're both 6-7. But I think that my Packers hold the edge and that our defense, they're going to be kind of out for revenge this game, you know, after like how weak they played. And I think that Joe Barry, you know, needs to show that he can coach these guys and dominate a team like the Buccaneers, who have talent, and just show that you can shut them down. You know, because I think the Packers aren't going to need to worry about the run as much. Maybe the Buccaneers try to, you know, revive their run game against the Packers, to be honest with you, but they just haven't been able to run it against really anybody this year. I'm going to say my Packers score 27, and the Buccaneers are going to score 23. I think this is a game that could come down to the wire. I think that this is a game that, you know, many people are probably going to overlook, to be honest, and rightfully so. Like with the way these teams have been playing, unless one of them gets hot near between here and the end of the year, which my Packers were going hot into Monday night, but that completely simmered out with just, I think, poor play calling. I wouldn't say bad offensive coaching, but it's just, you know, bad play calling even on the offensive side with too many jet sweep. But I don't think LaFleur is going to do that again, where he essentially put a lot of pressure on Jordan Love to try and make plays on 3rd and long on numerous occasions. But yeah, I think my Packers win that game. We obviously covered Jaguars already. Now we go and we look at Browns, Bears. The Browns, you know, I don't think that they're starting Flacco anymore. Last I heard, I think I heard that he was actually going to be going, and he was going to be going to the practice squad again. Or I guess, never mind. You know, I guess he's not going to the practice squad. Maybe I saw an old headline. Yeah, Joe Flacco looked good last week. You know, you look at the schedule and you look at who they played. Obviously, you know, last week they played Jacksonville. They beat them 31-27, but Flacco threw for 311. Njoku had, you know, 91 yards, which, you know, I think he needs to have. I think he really has a confidence issue because of how many balls he drops, but I think that he's a pretty talented tight end that can do it all if he, you know, is motivated to do so. He's looked, sketchy on the run blocking, in my opinion. But the Bears looked hot last week. Obviously, you think about the Browns and that they're 8-5. They have a really good defense. And the Bears are having to go up against, I'm not sure if the Browns are the number one defense anymore. But they're still a top defense. And I don't think that Fields is going to be able to get away from Garrett. And if I recall correctly, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but I remember Garrett just smothering Fields. Like, if you guys know what game I'm talking about, he got to him a ton of times, which I kind of think is going to be the same case, unless they're really smart and they're doing these short passes. But you saw that most of their success against the Lions was coming from deep balls, DJ Moore escaping, blown coverages from the Lions. I don't think that happens this week. I think that the Browns win this game. Excuse me for emblemishing. You know what? The Browns take this game, and they're going to put a damper on the Bears' success these last few weeks, because I really think that Myles Garrett is going to get after Fields. I think that they're not going to be able to contain Myles Garrett. And, the Browns, well, they're probably not competing for, the division anymore unless the Ravens have some colossal fallback the last 4 games. They're more than likely going to finish the year. I mean, this is just a prediction at like 11-6, in my opinion. Because I think that Flacco came in, wants to show that he still has it. They have, a talented team where it's like they don't even need to fully lean on Flacco, obviously. They had him pass it quite a bit, but his arm looked really good. Even looked like he had some decent mobility for an older guy to get out if he needs to at some points. And I think that's going to really, really help them. He's going to give them the consistency that I guess Watson didn't have. The rookie didn't have. I forget his hyphenated name. I'm sorry. No disrespect. But yeah, the Browns, I think, win this game. And I don't think that they score a ton, but I think that they score 24-20 off of a Bears team who has some momentum. But I think there's going to be too much for them to overcome in this game. Moving on, we have Eagles-Seahawks. The Eagles, as we know, embarrassed last week against the Cowboys. They just looked like out of funk, like they needed a couple days rest or something. Like, I do not know what was with the Eagles. They just looked like they lacked energy. In the second half, they came out and they looked like they kind of had a little bit more energy, but too little, too late. Goodness, you give that much momentum to the Cowboys, and they were still able to just ride it to victory. But the Eagles and the Seahawks have had a rough go of it. And it's been really odd with them, the way that they've been playing. Thinking about it, looking at these teams, I think that you still have the Seahawks who are not playing Geno. I think Geno, he's questionable, I guess. Even if he does play, do we trust for him to get the protection he needs to throw the ball, against the Eagles? Kenneth Walker is back, but I feel like, the Seahawks don't run the ball enough. Kenneth Walker has had some blowout games this year where he's just ran free. But I still just feel like they don't run the ball enough. And I don't think that's the Eagles' weakness either. Their weakness has kind of been in their passing game, but they've been able to play stout against the run. Like, most of when they were exploited last week wasn't even against the run, and Tony Pollard, who I think is very similar back to Kenneth Walker, both speedy, a good agility type backs that can also receive the ball. But yeah, the Seattle, I just don't know what to say. I feel sorry for them for having such a bad stretch. I feel like they could win this game, but I feel like they also are going to go up against an Eagles team that is going to run all over them, to be honest with you. I think that hurts. I think that they're going to do a bit more with the run. It's going to be Hurts, and it's going to be and DeAndre Swift, who, still had some good spunk, type of thing. And I think that and I say this, but the Seahawks, they were supposed to have this really good young corner duo in Woolen and Witherspoon, and they just looked bad. There's a game that the Eagles are going to bounce back. It is against a struggling Seahawks team that, I just don't think that they really have an identity. And while the Eagles, kind of got hammered last week, they're going to come back and they're going to win because they have the easier schedule to finish the year. And I'm quite certain that they'll probably have gotten some additional rest. And they're going to play a lot easier of a team than the Cowboys and the Seahawks this week. So I'm going Eagles. And I think that they can score a good amount of points. I think that they score 31 this game. And the Seahawks, I'm going to say score 20. And that's my prediction for this one. Moving on, we already covered all these teams and their, respectable counterparts. But we got the on the bubble teams. Looking at the Rams, they play the Commanders. The Rams actually put up a good fight last week. I think that they actually lost, if memory serves. But they put up quite a fight, I think. Looking at their schedule, who did they play last week? And let me check it real quick. Oh yeah, they played Baltimore. And it's like it was an overtime game and they ultimately lost it. On their special teams. Their special teams gave up the game with just poor tackling, not finishing tackling. Numerous guys could have had the return man, but they did not. They did not have, containment, and even the few guys that got. So I fully expect the Rams to come out and secure a win against a Commanders team that clearly they kind of sold house on defense. They were kind of ready to concede this year. They know that Howell can be the guy for them in the future and that their offense isn't terrible. But they have somewhat suffered lately because of an inconsistent offense that hasn't scored as much as you would like, with the guy who's going to be their future. But obviously, I still think they have pieces to add on offense. Obviously, their defense is kind of in full rebuild. They only have one really, truly solid player on Washington, in Jonathan Allen. But he could still be out in the offseason, to be honest with you, if he's really still unhappy. But, yeah, looking at this team and looking at their defense, a lot of guys, some that could be role players in my opinion, but I think Stafford, Puka, Cooper, and even Tutu Atwell, who's questionable, but Ben Skoranek has played well. Tyler Higbee's still a pretty good tight end, that does, a little bit of everything. And I think that, this defense, who is still led by Aaron Donald, you got Akello Witherspoon and Kobe Durant, who I think are two good young corners. I think that this is an underrated team that is well coached by Sean McVay. They've just had some inconsistency this year at quarterback, which I think is why they're 6-7. But the Rams are a team that has really surprised me this year. Up until this point, with even being 6-7. Puka Nacua has turned out to be a steal. So I'm obviously going to be picking the Rams. I like Scary Terry. I've always liked Scary Terry. It's ridiculous how freakish he is. But the Rams this game, I feel like they could score even more. I think that they're actually going to go, and I'm going to put the coveted 37 here. And the Commanders, I'm sorry, but I'm going to put you down at 17. I don't think you have much of a shot in this game. Moving on, we have Texans Titans. Crazy game here, which I wouldn't have said before Monday night, but the Titans happened to play well against Tua, Tyreek, Waddle, ended up winning off of a game-winning drive off of, Will Levis. CJ Stroud, though, coming off of a loss, I think that we've seen that he can play well off of a loss. Now, going and looking at them, the Texans, if you look at their schedule right now, I clicked the wrong tab 1 second. Their schedule right now is that they did start off the year with 2 losses, but then they come out and they win against Jacksonville when they lost to Indianapolis week 2, 31-20. Their next loss would come at Atlanta, and then they would handle New Orleans 20-13. They would lose to Carolina the week after, which is really funny, but then they scored the living hell out of Tampa Bay in a close game 39-37. And then they do lose to Jacksonville 24-21, but then they come and they beat Denver and they force, 3 turnovers on Russell Wilson. And then last week, what the hell? They lose 30-6 to New York in the rain. Yes, I know that Stroud went out. It was kind of huge and that sort of thing. I guess I don't know if he's not going to play, to be honest. I guess he's doubtful. Let me look at the actual injury report here. So he's still in concussion protocol. And I feel like he could clear it, but goodness, is that a blow to them? I guess, that makes this game really hard to predict. This is going to be one of these that I'm going to kind of leave. I'm not going to give any definitive answer to, but they've obviously probably been going all week with the prospect that, there's a good chance that he doesn't play, and they play Davis Mills, who I think is a very good low risk quarterback, can do some good throws, isn't going to risk the ball too much, But yeah, you have Nico Collins questionable, you have Noah Brown questionable, and then you have, Devin Singletary is your, starting running back right now. So it's like, what is going to go on? And then Will Anderson is also out and Blake Cashman. But I just don't want to say that I don't want to say that I don't think the Texans can win, but they're kind of fighting a uphill battle. They have Tank Dell, who's obviously been on IR. That's not really, hasn't been affecting them in the last, for a little while now. But the Texans, I think this is definitely their game to lose. And the Titans, I mean, they still have, they're still playing. Obviously, they went to compete against the Dolphins, and they affected the Dolphins where they're at, and whether they were able to obviously move up in the standings, because they definitely were probably looking to possibly move up, and then possibly get ahead this week, where the Ravens have a tougher matchup. But I think I'm gonna pick Titans if CJ Stroud doesn't play, but I'm picking Texans if he does, because I think that he's just been such a phenomenal rebound player this year. And yeah, he's had some off games, which is, only natural when you're a young QB, even though he was such a high prospect. I think it's hard to do amazing as he's done in his rookie year, as amazing of a rookie year we've, ever seen from anybody. So I'm going to go Titans if Stroud doesn't play, but I'm going to go Texans if he does, because I really do think that's the difference in this game. We already covered this. We'll be moving on to Falcons, Panthers. This seems like an incredibly bait game. The Falcons, I feel like kind of, last week they obviously, they lost against the Buccaneers, losing their NFC South division lead. The Panthers are obviously kind of a bad team, but the Falcons have been really shaky this year. I don't really want to put too much stock in the Falcons, because I feel like the Panthers may just give them trouble, and it's like, they're still they have, they're still starting Desmond Ridder, who always worries me with how he plays. And I like this defense, but they are somewhat banged up, to be honest with you, on the Falcons. It's like, I guess AJ Terrell and Okuda are fully healthy finally, but you got Bud Dupree questionable, Landman, Kentavious Street, who I think is out, who has been playing well, and then Oni Ameda is questionable as well. So Calais Campbell and Arnold Abigadi, sorry, I'm probably butchering that. They're fully healthy guys that are in their front seven. And don't get me wrong, I like this secondary of the Falcons. I think that Okuda, has proven that he can still be a starter after having an injury plagued and troubled time with the Lions. But I think we've realized at this point that the Lions, doesn't matter who they have at DB, their scheme is just bad on defense. And then AJ Terrell, gotta love AJ Terrell, such a young dog at corner. But the Panthers, looking at this, obviously have JC Horn fully healthy, Von Bell, Dante Jackson, Jeremy Chin is back at cornerback, I guess, and then even CJ Henderson. This is a young, hungry secondary. And Ritter just hasn't looked good passing it. I just don't like Ritter in the way that he passes it, to be honest with you. Like, it's one of those things that it's the fine line between it being a close game and a game the Falcons should win. And it's the reason why they are 6-7. With the team with the players that this team has, I think the Falcons are the best in their division. They just have gotten such inconsistency from QB that it's sent their season into suspect, where it's suspect on whether they win on Sunday. I still think that they win. I think that Drake London does really good. I think that Mac Hollins is really good. Van Jefferson is serviceable. Kyle Pitts finally had a game last week. Ritter just needs, I don't know what he needs to do. He has everything he needs. He's got the arm, he's got the legs, he's obviously the most athletic quarterback that the Falcons have had since Vic. But they just got to put it together. Even with that, even if he does commit these mistakes, I am going to pick the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm going to say 24-21. And that is my pick for this game. This AFC or this NFC South, matchup late in the year. Moving on, we have Saints Giants. The Giants just coming off a crazy win. The Saints obviously still competing for a playoff spot. In this NFC South, that it's like they're third, but 6-7, 3 teams at 6-7. You could potentially win out. And I would say against the Giants, maybe they had a fluke of a game. On Monday where it's like, oh yeah, we got pretty lucky. And it's like, but sometimes luck is good, and they have good momentum and good energy about them is what I want to say. And the Saints just haven't played, incredibly good. They did win last week. Now, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, they did win last week, but it was against the Panthers. And they won 28-6, so they dominated. Clearly didn't have to do much on offense because Carr only threw for 119. Kamara ran for 56. And their leading receiver was Perry at 44. 44 yards, guys, was their leading receiver. Even though they have guys like Drake, even though they have Chris Olave, who I guess is questionable. You've got Rashid Shaheed, who is just a Blazer. Obviously, Michael Thomas has been on IR for a little while now. He's injured again. And, Alvin Kamara, and then it's like Jamal Williams is questionable, unfortunately, but it's like you have a very solid supporting cast for Derek Carr. You should be able to play and do some things. The only question mark I have is Lynn Boyden Jr., who I don't really know. But they've even put Taysom Hill at wide receiver. Like Taysom Hill is like that wildcat, but wild card play. And what's gonna happen? But I actually do expect. I think the Saints win. I think that, they're not going to be able to, the Giants aren't going to be able to run the ball as well with Saquon Barkley because of the defense of New Orleans. Cameron Jordan's too good. You even have Carl Granderson on the other side, who has been playing really well. I love that guy. And then you have Demario Davis, still a really good linebacker. Nafis Sewell, who is, kind of emerging as kind of a player to watch now on their team. And then, I guess the one crazy thing is that, your cornerback core is beat up with Marshawn Lattimore on IR, Marcus May on IR. But you have a lot of these scrappy guys on the Saints. And I just don't think it's going to be as crazy of a game where, DeVito is going to be able to just scramble it all day. I just don't think that the New Orleans defense is going to allow that. Like, he's going to get beat up if he's running it as much because the Packers, the one thing I'll say that, I hated the whole game is how well DeVito ran it for like 7 yards a carry. It was like 10 carries for like 71 yards. Yeah, sometimes it's like he didn't get very far, only on a couple of runs, but he was carving up the defense with his running because there was no contain. There was nothing that they were doing, to prevent that. And it's like, but New Orleans is a lot tougher of a defense, in my opinion. And I think that, they're going to make DeVito win with his arm, and it is in New Orleans. And I think that DeVito is going to realize this, how hard it is to play in the Superdome against the Saints. For that reason, I am going to say that I think the Saints win this game. But I think that they aren't going to score a ton. And it's going to be a close game at 23 to 20. Just because I don't like the way the Saints have performed on offense. And they just haven't proved it consistently enough this year. Moving on, we obviously don't have to cover Peters Chargers, guys. And then we've already covered this game. Let me see if there's even any games left. I don't think there is any. Okay, yep, and we've covered all of the games. If there's anything you guys would like to say, I would want to leave it open to you, or what you guys think of this year and what you think of the schedule this week. Because, goodness gracious, is it going to be like an interesting weekend? I think there's a lot of games that, could make a lot of shakeups and that sort of thing. So be prepared for a crazy weekend. And it starts tomorrow, in less than 24 hours, we're getting, the first game. That game being Minnesota and Cincinnati, which I think, good crazy scene, I guess. And, the NFC, the only one playoff spot, 6 playoff berths available, where it's like only the Niners, have obviously been at, and only 2 teams in the league have been, eliminated from playoff contention, which is just crazy to think. And I think this week there's only a couple of other teams that, could potentially get eliminated, I guess. But, yeah, if nobody else wants to say anything, then I would just like to mention that, I hope your team does well, assuming they're not playing my Packers, of course. And I'll see you guys next Tuesday. And my schedule, I'm gonna be posting and updating my schedule on my YouTube, but on Tuesdays I'm more than likely going to be doing it's gonna be 11 a.m. Starting on Tuesdays when I'm gonna be doing 11 a.m. Eastern time. So if you're on Pacific, it's gonna be, or let me think. Wait. Yes. So 11 a.m. Eastern time, and then earlier, obviously, on each other time zone. But I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and if you have any opinions or questions for me, I'll look at the chat. If you watch this after it's broadcasted. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. And as always, go Pack Go.